everyone. Hope you're having a good week so far. We are picking back up Genesis 27 this week. And we're, like we said before, we're past the halfway point. We've moved into the second, and now we're in the third generation of Genesis' patriarchs. So we are now getting into the heart of what's going to be the rest of the book of Genesis, which is the Jacob narratives. And Jacob is the main character in Genesis. Jacob and Abraham are what the book of Genesis is all about, really. Everything else, creation and Noah and all that stuff, is incidental compared to the importance of Abraham and then Jacob in carrying on the blessings that God intends for all mankind. Remember, Genesis 12 started put things in motion with the covenant that God would bless the seed of Abraham, and then he would in turn be a blessing to others. And through Abraham's offspring, all the peoples of the earth will be blessed. So everything that Genesis is doing, it's geared towards showing how that's going to happen, how all the nations of the earth are going to be blessed through this seed of Abraham. And it takes twists and it takes turns, and sometimes it looks like they're not going to be blessed, and sometimes it looks like the blessing's in danger. And sometimes the relationship between the covenant people and the Gentiles or the nations is one of hostility. Sometimes it's one of friendship. So all of these themes are percolating throughout the book of Genesis. And at the end of last chapter, chapter 26, it ended with this little side note. After it had gone about Isaac and Isaac's life and God blessing him and making a covenant and Isaac making peace with the surrounding nations and then being blessed as a result, then it ended with verse 34 and 35. And usually those get glossed over, but that is the bridge to this chapter. Verse 34 and 35 of 26 says, "When Esau was 40 years old, he married Judith, the daughter of Beeri the Hittite, and Basemath, the daughter of Elon the Hittite. They were a source of grief to Isaac and Rebekah." That word grief is bitterness, literally. Source of bitterness. That word's going to come into play near the end of this next chapter. So, setting it up right now, Esau was the firstborn of the twins. Jacob was the one who God said eventually it'll work out so that the older serves the younger, which is not how it works in ancient Near East culture. Esau was the firstborn. We learned in the last chapter when Esau despised his birthright. What did he trade his status as the heir for?
Bowl of soup?
Yeah, some of this. Basically, this reddish stuff, some red stuff.
I don't think it was that good.
Probably not. I don't know. I've been in the Middle East. They can cook. It might have been better. He traded it for some red stew, some lentil stew. Traded his entire right. So we've already seen that Esau is not fit to be the next heir in the Abrahamic clan family, covenant family. And then the end of the chapter brings that home even more, that he not only married Hittite women, which we've seen the theme of wanting to get a wife for the patriarch's children from Abram's own people up in Haran, but he married local Hittite women, 2 of them. So again, the last time we saw someone taking 2 wives was back in Genesis, in the Table of Nations and the genealogies, and it was a guy named Lamech, and he bragged about his 2 wives that he took. And so there's nothing in the text that would make you think it's okay to take 2 wives thus far. In fact, that's usually a sign that there are bad things to come. And there are. So we pick up in chapter 27. So we've seen that Esau is supposed to be the heir, according to everything in the natural world around him, but he's not fit for it in multiple ways. He's sort of a meathead. He's a jock. He's an outdoorsy guy. He's watching the Outdoors Network and, sharpening up his arrows for deer season every year and buying all expensive camo and duck calls and all that kind of stuff. That's Esau. He's at Dick's Sporting Goods or whatever the big outlet for hunters are. Jacob is, on the other hand, he's a quiet man. He's a smooth man. He's a slick character. He's a inside guy. He's watching HGTV and saying which throw pillow goes with which rug. He's reading and writing poetry and painting pictures and that kind of thing. So you couldn't have more opposites in terms of their characters. Chapter 27, verse 1. When Isaac was old, and his eyes were so weak that he could no longer see well, he called for Esau, his older son, and said to him, "My son." "Here I am," he answered. And that's just a way in the ancient Near East of saying, "You rang." Like if you watch the Addams Family, where people say, "You rang." It's just a way of saying, yes. You'll see that phrase, "Here I am," all throughout the Torah when people are called. "Here I am," he answered. Isaac said, "I'm now an old man and don't know the day of my death. Now, get your weapons, a quiver and your bow, and go out to the open country to hunt some wild game for me. Prepare for me the kind of delicious food I like," or tasty food in the NIV, "and bring it to me to eat, so that I may give you my blessing before I die." Now Rebekah was listening as Isaac spoke to his son Esau. When Esau left for the open country to hunt game and bring it back, Rebekah said to her son Jacob, "Look, I overheard your father say to your brother Esau, 'Bring me some game and prepare me some tasty food to eat, so that I may give you my blessing in the presence of the Lord before I die. Now, my son, listen carefully and do what I tell you. Go out to the flock, bring me 2 choice young goats, so that I can prepare some tasty food for your father, just the way he likes it. Then take it to your father to eat, so that he may give you his blessing before he dies.' Jacob said to Rebekah, his mother, 'Well, my brother Esau is a hairy man, and I'm a man with smooth skin. What if my father touches me? I would appear to be tricking him and would bring down a curse on myself rather than a blessing.' His mother said to him, 'My son, let the curse fall on me. Just do what I say. Go and get them for me.'" So, the context. In the ancient Near East, this is again where our cultures are so vastly different that we have trouble understanding what's going on sometimes. In the ancient Near East, to give your final blessing was the equivalent of a modern last will and testament, signed and notarized by a lawyer. It was a legally binding pronouncement that passed on the leadership of the family or the clan to the next generation. It wasn't just a nice sentimental word. And it also wasn't just, "Here's what I want for you." It was also a prophetic oracle of some type. It was believed to have had realistic power in bringing about fortune or destruction, good or evil. And it was spoken in the presence of God himself. So it couldn't be broken. It couldn't be annulled. It couldn't be gone back on. It was a very solemn event. Now, there's some strange things in this. For one, Isaac's old and he wants to pass on his blessing. The normal thing to do would have been to gather the family and do this. To do this with both sons there and the community, maybe the people who sit at the gate. We've seen that term before, the elders, the people. So it would have been a public event normally, or at least we would expect Jacob and Esau to be there. So the fact that he's just having Esau may speak to a little bit of favoritism going on here. That would have been not the most proper thing to do on Isaac's part. Also, the fact that he says, "Go get me something that I like first." In other words, you do something for me so that I can then turn and bless you. When in fact, if he's getting near his death, a meal would have been part of it, but the importance of passing on the blessing should have probably made this a more formal occasion and happen sooner, or at least happen in the presence. In other words, it doesn't seem an exactly right way to do this thing, this blessing, this giving of leadership to the next generation. But that's what it is. It's a pronouncing of leadership. It's like the swearing in ceremony when the president's elected. That's sort of the official. That's the day you move from being president-elect to president. Yeah. It's official. That's sort of what's going on here. The spiritual and relational and family authority of all of the covenant people is being passed on to the next generation. So it's a very important event, and it's one that can't be taken back. It's set in the presence of God, and it is binding. Legally, spiritually, ethically, in all ways it is binding. So it's a really big deal. So Esau goes to do it, and Rebekah tells Jacob, "Okay, here's what you're going to do." Now, she doesn't, there's a couple of things on Rebekah's part. She doesn't ask him to do this. She tells him. And there's an obligation of honoring your mother and your father, listening to your family. So he would have been under a bit of obligation to do that. Or at least there would have been a conundrum. Do I do this or do I do what I probably know to be right? The other thing is, Rebecca says, or Jacob's afraid. Why is he afraid? What is his objection?
He might touch him.
That he might find out. And if he finds out, then he'll think I'm making fun of him, or that I'm belittling him, or that I'm dishonoring him, and he'll curse me instead of bless me. And what's Rebecca's response?
Go.
If that happens,
Go.
I'll take the blame. I'll take the curse. It'll be my fault. You're just following orders, is what he could fall back on. So there's a little bit of authority and some duplicity going on here, and there's a power struggle. He's the favored son of the father. He's daddy's boy. He's the outdoorsman. He makes his father proud. He hunts the game. He does all the stuff that dads want their sons to do. Jacob's the mama's boy. He doesn't have those qualities. He's more of the quiet, more of the calculating type. So she wants to, so there's this power struggle within the family, and it's going to pit brother against brother. It's going to pit son against father, and it's going to pit other son against mother, and all those dynamics that we see played out today even in our own families. So she tells him to go do this. There's a little bit of wordplay in verse 12. Jacob says, "What if my father touches me?" The NIV says, "I would appear to be tricking him," but what it says is literally, in his eyes, I would be belittling him. And the whole point is his eyes aren't working anymore. He can't see very well. So it's kind of like, basically asking, well, what if he sees me? It's like, so there's a little bit of irony there. But his mother says, just go do what I say. It's also interesting, she added the phrase, before the Lord. Did you catch that when he spoke and he said, bring me some tasty food to eat so that I may give you my blessing before I die? And then when Rebecca retells it, verse 7, he said, bring me some game and prepare me some tasty food to eat so that I may give you my blessing in the presence of Yahweh before I die. So she adds this little solemnness to it, which is odd. Verse 14 then, so she tells him, just go do it. So he went and he got them and he brought them to his mother, and she prepared some tasty food just the way his father liked it. Then Rebekah took the best clothes of Esau, her older son, which she had in the house, and put them on her younger son Jacob. She also covered his hands and the smooth part of his neck with goat skins. Then she handed her son Jacob the tasty food and bread that she had made. He went to his father and he said, my father. Yes, my son, he answered, who is it? Jacob said to his father, I'm Esau, your firstborn. I've done as you told me. Please sit up and eat some of my game so that you may give me your blessing. Isaac asked the son, how did you find it so quickly, my son? Yahweh, your God, gave me success, he replied. Then Isaac said to Jacob, come near so that I may touch you, my son, to know whether you're really my son Esau or not. Then Yahweh, he uses the name Yahweh, which is translated as Lord in your English Bibles in all caps. Yahweh, who's God?
Esau, Jacob.
What does it say? Yahweh,
Your God.
your God. Yahweh is not Jacob's God at this point. And we'll see in the coming chapters, he's not going to be Jacob's God for a while. Jacob does not have a relationship with the Lord. He is his dad's God. He is his dad's deity. He's not Jacob's deity, and he won't be until a couple of chapters later. Note that. Circle it, highlight it, whatever you want to do. So not only does he lie, but he brings God into his lie. And he uses the divine name. This is what the third commandment prohibits. And when we get to the Ten Commandments, he's completely breaking one of the main commandments. He's breaking a bunch of them. Honor your father and mother, and don't bear false witness, and don't take the Lord's name in vain. Jacob does all those. So he's a scoundrel at this point, and he will be for a while. So Jacob, real quick about the goat skin stuff. I've seen drawings of this in Bibles and things, and it's got they wrap this wool around him, and like that would fool anybody. Anybody ever been around goats?
No.
If you've been, okay, sheep, very woolly, very, just wool. Goats are different. Goats they're hairy, but it's a smooth hairiness. It's a short hair versus sheep wool. So he didn't wrap him up in sheep wool because that wouldn't fool anybody. Putting goat hair on him, around his neck, around his arms, and then he's got on Esau's clothes. that would have been, always when I teach on this, I'm like, well, I'm like Esau. I'm red and hairy. And if you, this is very pretty much what goat feels like, actually. If you petted a goat, and then you come and rub my arm, that's very similar. So this is kind of what we're going for here. So you wrap some goat skin on some smooth skin, and it'll feel like this, pretty much. So anyway, if you need an object lesson, come up afterwards. I'll let you do that. So it's not like this ridiculous ruse. I mean, they knew what they were doing, and so you sense there's some hesitancy on Isaac's part. So he says, come here so that I can know whether you're really my son Esau or not. Jacob went close to his father Isaac, who touched him and said, the voice is the voice of Jacob, but the hands are the hands of Esau, or arms. Hand and arm in Hebrew is the same word. He did not recognize him, for his hands were hairy like those of his brother Esau, so he blessed him. And then that phrase, so he blessed him, describes the whole event. Now in Hebrew narrative, it's going to go back, like it normally does, and tell you how that happened. So that so he blessed him is not he blessed him and then later will bless him again. It's a telling the whole situation. It's just like Saw Genesis 1 and 2. It's like we'll see in a lot of places. Gives you the whole account. So he blessed him. And this is how he did it. Are you really my son Esau, he asked. I am, he replied. Then he said, my son, bring me some of your game to eat so that I may give you my blessing. Jacob brought it to him and he ate. And he brought some wine and he drank. And his father Isaac said to him, come here, my son, and kiss me. So he went to him and kissed him. When Isaac caught the smell of his clothes, he blessed him and said, the smell of my son is like the smell of a field that the Lord has blessed. May God give you of heaven's dew and of earth's richness. Literally, it's of the fatness of the land. An abundance of grain and new wine. May nations serve you and peoples bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may the sons of your mother bow down to you. May those who curse you be cursed, and those who bless you be blessed. Now back up to verse 24. This is a really important event. Are you really my son Esau? He asked. I am, he replied. The next time he gets asked his name is going to be by God himself when they're wrestling all night, chapters and chapters later. So he's asked his name, he's asked his identity, and he lies about it to his own father. His father knew that there, or felt like there may be something wrong. The voice didn't exactly sound right. If you know identical twins, or even twins that are fraternal, sometimes they can sound really similar. Like I had a roommate, he had a twin brother, and they sounded almost the same, but there was a slight difference in how they talk. So that maybe that's what Isaac is picking up on. But when he has the food, he tastes the food, it's just like he likes it. He smells him, he feels his hands. So all of his other senses, except his eyes and his ears, are saying, this is Esau. So he blesses him, and he blesses him by passing on the blessing that God had blessed Abraham with, and Abraham had passed on to Isaac. Now Isaac's passing it on to Jacob. And we see the part of that blessing, may those who curse you be cursed, those who bless you be blessed. Part of that Abrahamic promise being carried on. God himself will appear to Jacob and will reaffirm this and officially pass on this Abrahamic blessing in later chapters. But at this point, he's pronouncing him the ruler of the family. That's what it means in verse 29. May nations serve you and peoples bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may the sons of your mother bow down to you. Now, there's some question. He only has one brother. Why does it say brothers and sons of your mother? For all we know, Rebekah only had Jacob and Esau. Well, possibility that they had other sons as well, and he has other younger brothers. Maybe. Or it may just be a poetic device. It may just be a normal figure of speech in Hebrew of saying, you're the head of the family. Could be that. It could also have in mind other relatives, cousins, and things like that. So some people have questioned about that, and it can be explained in a number of different ways. One thing that is worth pointing out too, again, that you may not get in your study Bible, is verse 28. May God give you of heavens or the skies dew. So heaven or sky is one element. Of the land or earth's richness, of abundance of grain, the Hebrew word is dagon, and of new wine, the Hebrew word is tirash. Now, heaven, earth, dagon, and tirash, those are four Canaanite gods Those are the names of 4 Canaanite gods that provided for the people around them, believed provided for their needs. So what he's doing is, what Jacob is being blessed with is all the things that all of the surrounding peoples pray to these other gods in order to receive. And the idea is that through carrying on this blessing from the one true God, you'll receive all of that stuff. All of these things the nations are chasing after. And it's interesting that it uses what are actually proper names for Canaanite gods at this point. Verse 30. After Isaac finished blessing him, and Jacob had scarcely left his father's presence, his brother Esau came in from hunting. He too prepared some tasty food and brought it to his father. Then he said to him, "My father, sit up and eat some of my game so that you may give me your blessing." His father asked him, "Who are you?" "I'm your son," he answered, "your firstborn son, Esau." Isaac trembled violently and said, "Who was it then that hunted game and brought it to me? I ate it just before you came, and I blessed him, and indeed he will be blessed." When Esau heard his father's words, he burst out with a loud and bitter cry and said to his father, "Bless me too, father." But he said, "Your brother came deceitfully and took your blessing." Esau said, "Isn't he rightly named Jacob?" Jacob means grabber, heel grabber, sneaky, come from behind, taker. "Isn't he rightly named Jacob? He's deceived me these 2 times. He took my birthright and now he's taken my blessing." Then he asked, "Haven't you reserved any blessing for me?" Isaac answered Esau, "I've made him lord over you, made all his relatives his servants, and I've sustained him with grain and new wine. What can I possibly do for you?" Esau said to his father, "Do you only have one blessing, father? Bless me too, father." And there's the LXX, the Septuagint, the Greek version of the Old Testament, has a phrase in this part that the Hebrew doesn't. It says, "But Isaac remained silent." So there's sort of this dramatic tension of Isaac just stoically sitting there realizing, "I can't. It's happened. It's too late." Then Esau wept aloud. His father Isaac answered him, "Your dwelling will be away from the earth's richness, or away from the fatness of the land, and from the dew of heaven above. You'll live by the sword, and you'll serve your brother. But when you grow restless, you will throw his yoke from off your neck." So Esau comes in, realizes what's happened, or they both realize what happened, and Esau becomes enraged, obviously. And here's where we see a little default in Esau's character again, is he still thinks that Jacob took something from him in the last chapter. Jacob didn't take anything from Esau. Now, this time Jacob took from him. But his birthright, he never took from him. Esau gave him that. Esau still hasn't realized that he's the one to blame for selling his birthright. He still doesn't get it. He's still thick. And just blames Jacob. But Jacob did come and steal this blessing. He did fraudulently receive what he shouldn't have received. And we read this and we think, well, what's the big deal? Why can't he just call him back in and say, "Okay, look, you tricked me, haha, joke's on you. You're going to get cursed. Esau's getting blessed because that's what I wanted." But again, that's because our culture, our setting, we don't have an appreciation for the power of the spoken word. The spoken word, especially spoken in the presence of God, is a solemn thing. It's something that was not taken lightly, to the point of even having to carry it out, even if you were tricked. There's going to be an instance when Israel enters the land in Joshua, and they're driving out people. They're told to drive everybody out. These Canaanites who God has said he's going to judge. And he's going to drive these people out, and there's going to be one group who come to Joshua, and they're going to trick Joshua, the Gibeonites. And they're going to say, "Oh, we've come from afar, and we want to join in, and we want to pledge our loyalty to you and everything." When in reality, they were right there. They just made themselves look like travelers. And so Joshua is going to make an oath that he'll protect them. And then it's going to be revealed that they tricked him, and that they should have been part of the judgment. But because of the oath, they are allowed to remain in Israel, because an oath spoken can't be broken. It can't be reneged on. It can't be changed in that culture. It's something we don't have that. We're a culture of fine print and notary stamps and witnesses and recorded voice recordings, telephone conversations, something that's off the record, on the record. That's how we operate, but it's not how it was in the Bible. There was this, and I think that while the biblical cultures might have been imperfect in some ways, where they placed too much emphasis on the spoken word, almost to the point where it became magic in their eyes, I think we've swung to the other extreme. And we've swung to the point in our culture where words don't really matter. It's what you have in writing, or it's what it's what you say on the record, or whatever. So you can have loopholes and things like that. That's the culture swing that we've gone to. And I think that in this case, it sort of points out there's something about the biblical notion of the power of your words. And the New Testament authors will pick up on that. And they'll say, from your mouth comes life and death. And that's why Jesus will say, slandering someone is in the same league as murder. And bearing false witness and calling your brother a fool puts you in danger of hellfire. And there's all of this stuff about the tongue and about language and speech and spoken words. And when I read this story, it's so far from where we are that it just seems odd. It seems weird. It seems like, why couldn't he just, bring both boys back in and fix it? Make it right. Get a do-over. And there's not in this story. And God, throughout this entire thing, is silent. And it's just recounting what's going on. You don't get God's commentary on this. Because from God's perspective, I think the author would suggest, that everybody in this scenario bears guilt in some way, shape, or form. Isaac showing favoritism and overlooking the fact that Esau's not fit to be the leader, and overlooking the fact that God had told Rebekah that the younger would serve the older. Rebekah trying to finagle things, trying to help God out like Sarah did with Hagar, trying to make the promise that God said happen, make it happen through being deceitful. Jacob going along with it, deceiving and dishonoring and making a fool of his father, even if his father didn't find out until afterwards. And then Esau still refusing to realize how he's already disqualified himself for leadership through his polygamous Canaanite marriage, through his selling of his birthright, and now, as we'll see in the next chapter, through his plan for murdering his brother. So everybody in this account is seemingly, there's no perfect characters in it. And that's going to be paradigmatic for the rest of Genesis. It's going to be dysfunctional family after dysfunctional family, brothers against brothers, parents mad at children dishonoring parents, multiple marriages, polygamy, all of that. It's going to come into play. And through all of that, God is still going to carry forth his promised blessing. And it's right at the center of this narrative, verse 33. I blessed him, and indeed he will be blessed. So through the twists and the turns, through the sin, through the ignorance, through the rebellion, through the stupidity, through everything, the blessing that God gave, the original promise to the seed of the woman, transmitted to the seed of Abraham, transmitted to the offspring of Isaac, is going to find its fulfillment. So that's what the rest of Genesis is going to unfold. We'll pick up because the next section really begins in verse 41 of this chapter. Again, chapter breaks are not original to the text. They're arbitrary. They were at the Middle Ages, and they aren't always helpful. And in this case, chapter 28 is started in a weird place. So we'll pick it up next week when Jacob is going to hightail it out of town after pulling off this heist. So see you next Tuesday.